So we're live.
Okay.
When I say let's go live, I'm pushing the button. Just so you know.
We had fondue. I wanted to make sure I wasn't just grinning broccoli at the entire interwebs.
I mean, the interwebs appreciates that, I'm sure.
Right? Yum. Oh well. The interwebs appreciates everything. It is a very appreciative consciousness.
Sure.
Yeah. Hello, fellow neurons in the consciousness of the interwebs. I've been reading a lot of Tom Robbins. Does it show?
Yes. Very, very yes.
I'm sorry. Like, I can't work on my own books for a while because I'll just be trying for his idiom without meaning to, and it'll come out a hodgepodge.
He's got one of them catchy styles.
It's contagious. Not that I'm clever enough to actually engage in it, but I can't finish that sentence. I'm full of fondue.
That's what they all say.
So it's my turn to read, yeah?
Yes, indeed. I'm going to wind some yarn.
Nice.
It smells weird.
I wanted to show you. Jason made me this for the next time I'm crafting. Look at this.
Ooh. Like a laptop stand situation?
It totally is, except that it points the camera at this space like right in front of where I am. So
wonderful.
I know, I'm super happy with it. He's not, but then he's never happy with anything he makes.
Gosh, what's that like?
Yeah. I have grown conceited in my old age, and now I actually think I'm pretty good at the stuff I do.
Good.
Thank you.
You should think that, because you are.
I know, right?
This yarn, so I bought this yarn to dye back when I had a dyeing business, and it's been like just in storage for 6-7 years. And it just smells weird. You know, when stuff's in storage for a long time and it gets like that really funky, like, I don't even know what it is, like chemically smell?
Yeah.
I'm hoping it airs out while I wind it, and then I can knit with it and not just be like,
you could put it in a box with like something that's really benign smelling, some cedar chips, or
I have some lavender dryer bags I can put it with.
There you go. Yeah, something that'll soak up the smell or give it a nice smell that isn't like musty and slightly rancid.
Yes, but then I can't do anything with it right now.
Okay, make something with it and then put it in a box with cedar chips.
Maybe I'll wind it. I mean, I don't have any cedar chips. It's going to be lavender dryer bags.
That's what I meant.
I'll wind it and see how it does, and then if it still smells, maybe I'll do that. But I had an urge. So first of all, I shouldn't be knitting too much because I've hurt my thumb, which is also why so here's the thing. I'm on my phone a lot right now, and I had a really bad work setup for the first couple weeks I was working from home, and that combined with the fact that I have a lot of joint hypermobility in my wrists and thumbs just makes it hate me now. Because apparently your thumb shouldn't bend like this angle right here where it just goes further sideways from the joint. It oughtn't to do that.
And so everything in that region is going to fuss at you because you do that.
And it's the left one because of course it is. So all of that being said, I of course got a immediate urge to start knitting a sweater.
Yeah, that is a thing. I mean, I screwed up my shoulder something like a year and a half ago carrying a heavy bag about 2 miles. And my shoulder felt wrong, and I was like, oh, it'll be fine. It has never been fine. It has not since that day been fine. Its mobility is extremely restricted, and the only thing that helps is yoga. And in yoga, you do a lot of downward facing dog, which is excruciatingly uncomfortable, but then it sort of reseats it for a little while, so the rest of my movement doesn't accidentally make it go.
When this is all over, you should probably have some physical therapy for that.
Absolutely. I was actually thinking about a chiropractor because it really just feels like it's not seated in the joint quite right.
Well, so the reason I say physical therapy is because once it gets reseated in the joint, you're going to have to retrain your muscles to hold it there. That's what I had to do for both of my shoulders.
Right.
Like, that's why I spent months and months in physical therapy for them.
Yeah, but I don't have a hypermobility problem.
Don't you?
No, I do not. I can't do that with me.
Well, that's not like you can have hypermobility in different joints. But also joints work the same even if they're hypermobile. Same.
Yeah, no, I think you got that from Dad's side of things because
Carrie has it.
Yeah, okay. Well,
and so does Morgan Brown.
So Mom goes for similar kinds of guys periodically, and so did I.
I mean, I'm not the genetics police. I'm just saying.
I don't think I bruise real easily. How's that for evidence to the contrary?
Dubious evidence. Different people have different symptoms. That's the thing. You can have some joints that are affected and others that aren't. Your like vascular system can be affected or it cannot be affected. Like, I'm just saying, just because you don't have.
And you're the rubber band human.
I'm a rubber band human, but just because you're not a rubber band human doesn't mean that you are not also potentially affected by sharing 50% of my genetics.
True.
50%, yeah.
You know, roughly, genetics, it turns out, is not that cut and dried.
What?
I had words I was going to say. I have lost them. I'm sad about your thumb.
I am also sad about my thumb. And of course it's the left one because of course it is. And I may have already said that.
Yeah, but it's deserves repetition.
And it's like the pinch grip is part of it. So like this type of movement is a little sore right now. And opening
shoulder
doors.
Because I have a good range, but if it's really random when suddenly it'll be like I'll go, ow. I'm going to read now.
Okay, I'm going to wind this yarn.
I don't have the right place marked.
It's after the Barrow-wights when the hobbits were about to frolic naked on the lawn.
Frolicking on the lawn naked? That's one of my favorite things. It reminds me of that old joke. They say eating naked in front of a mirror helps to stem your calorie intake. It doesn't work, and incidentally, on a similar topic, I'm no longer welcome at Target.
So I was going to say, when you were like, frolicking naked on the lawn, I was going to be like, our mother watches this, right? And then I was like, as if she'd be surprised.
She would not.
I can't. Okay, this project might be doomed from the get-go because I can't get the pegs out of the. There we go. Pegs removed.
Huzzah!
Carry on.
I shall. The air was growing very warm again. The hobbits ran about for a while on the grass, as he told them. Then they lay basking in the sun with the delight of those that have been wafted suddenly from bitter winter to a friendly clime, or of people that, after being long ill and bedridden, wake one day to find that they are unexpectedly well, and the day is again full of promise. By the time that Tom returned, they were feeling strong and hungry. He reappeared, hat first, over the brow of the hill, and behind him came in an obedient line 6 ponies, their own 5, and one more. The last was plainly old Fatty Lumpkin. He was larger, stronger, fatter, and older than their own ponies. Mary, to whom the others belonged, had not, in fact, given them any such names. Everybody recalls that Tom was calling for Sharp Ears, Wise Nose, Swish Tail, Bumpkin, White Socks, and Fatty Lumpkin. Yeah, that's that. But they answered to the new names that Tom had given them for the rest of their lives. Tom called them one by one, and they climbed over the brow and stood in a line. Then Tom bowed to the hobbits. It's funny, like, Wise Nose? Wise Nose, come here! Whoa, Wise Nose. Giddy up, Wise Nose.
Right? Do they call him Nosy for short?
Oh, something occurred to me when you were reading, and I didn't share it with you, but I wish I had, because it we've been watching Twin Peaks every other night, and dude was singing Mersey Dotes, and I realized Mersey Dotes and Cold Be Hand and Heart and Bone are very, very similar.
Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be travelers far from home. We do not see what lies ahead when sun has sailed. That is as inappropriately cheerful as my tone of voice.
And little lambs eat ivy, and still on gold here let them lie, till the Dark Lord lifts his hand. Okay, it doesn't quite work, but the first 2 lines, yeah.
Right.
Cold hand and heart and bone.
Let's just move some of this detritus. There we go. Now it looks like I'm a more or less functional adult.
Here are your ponies now, Tom said. They've more sense in some ways than you wandering hobbits have. More sense in their noses, for they sniff danger ahead which you walk right into. And if they run to save themselves, then they run the right way. You must forgive them all, for though their hearts are faithful, to face fear of Barrow-wights is not what they were made for. See, here they come again, bringing all their burdens. Merry, Sam, and Pippin now clothed themselves in spare garments from their packs, and they soon felt too hot, for they were obliged to put on some of the thicker and warmer things that they had brought against the oncoming of winter. Where does that other animal, that Fatty Lumpkin, come from? Asked Frodo. He's mine, said Tom, my 4-legged friend, though I seldom ride him, and he wanders often far, free upon the hillsides. When your ponies stayed with me, they got to know my Lumpkin, and they smelt him in the night and quickly ran to meet him. I thought he'd look for them, and with his words of wisdom take all their fear away. But now, my jolly Lumpkin, old Tom's going to ride. Hey, he's coming with you, just to see you set you on the road. So he needs a pony, for you cannot easily talk to hobbits that are riding when you're on your own legs, trying to trot beside them. The hobbits were delighted to hear this, and thanked Tom many times. But he laughed, and said they were so good at losing themselves that he would not feel happy till he had seen them safe over the borders of his land.
Legit.
Totally. Also, go be someone else's problem.
Right? I turn my back for 10 minutes. I point you directly at the road. You end up eaten by Barrow-wights.
Please, Barrow, whatever. There is no danger that you can't wander into.
Goodness knows.
I've got things to do, he said. My making and my singing, my talking and my walking, and my watching of the country. Tom can't be always near to open doors and willow cracks. Tom has his house to mind, and Goldberry is waiting. It was still fairly early by the sun, something between 9 and 10, and the hobbits turned their minds to food. Their last meal had been lunch beside the standing stone the day before. They breakfasted now off the remainder of Tom's provisions, meant for their supper, with additions that Tom had brought with him. It was not a large meal, considering hobbits and the circumstances, but they felt much better for it. While they were eating, Tom went up to the mound and looked through the treasures. Most of these he made into a pile that glistened and sparkled on the grass. He bade them lie there, free to all finders, birds, beasts, elves or men, and all kindly creatures. For so the spell of the mound should be broken and scattered, and no wight ever come back to it. He chose for himself from the pile a brooch set with blue stones, many shaded like flax flowers or the wings of blue butterflies. He looked long at it as if stirred by some memory, shaking his head, and saying at last, "Here is a pretty toy for Tom and for his lady. Fair was she who long ago wore this on her shoulder. Goldberry shall wear it now, and we will not forget her."
Which is really touching when you think about that. Like, because Tom has enough whatever eldritch capability he has to like actually know who that brooch was made for, and they're always going to remember her.
He may have had dinner in their hall, like...
I mean, sure, that too.
Yes.
But just like, may we all be lucky enough to be worn on Goldberry's dress and remembered.
Right? That's true immortality, that is.
Mm-hmm.
For each of the hobbits he chose a dagger, long, leaf-shaped and keen, of marvelous workmanship, damasked with serpent forms in red and gold. They gleamed as he drew them from their black sheaths, wrought of some strange metal, light and strong, and set with many fiery stones. Whether by some virtue in these sheaths, or because of the spell that lay on the mound, the blades seemed untouched by time, unrusted, sharp, glittering in the sun. "Old knives are long enough as swords for hobbit people," he said. "Sharp blades are good to have if shire folk go walking, east, south, or far away, into dark and danger." Then he told them that these blades were forged many long years ago by men of Westerness. They were foes of the Dark Lord, but they were overcome by the evil king of Carn Dûm in the land of Angmar. "Few now remember them," Tom murmured, "yet still some go wandering, sons of forgotten kings walking in loneliness, guarding from evil things folk that are heedless."
Foreshadowing.
The hobbits did not understand his words, but as he spoke they had a vision, as it were, of a great expanse of years behind them, like a vast shadowy plain over which there strode shapes of men, tall and grim, with bright swords, and last came one with a star on his brow. Then the vision faded, and they were back in the sunlit world. It was time to start again. They made ready, packing their bags and lading their ponies. Their new weapons they hung on their leather belts under their jackets, feeling them very awkward, and wondering if they would be of any use. Fighting had not before occurred to any of them as one of the adventures in which their flight would land them. Naive.
Sweet summer children.
At last they set off. They led their ponies down the hill, and then mounting, they trotted quickly along the valley. They looked back and saw the top of the old mound on the hill, and from it the sunlight on the gold went up like a yellow flame. Then they turned a shoulder of the downs, and it was hidden from view. Though Frodo looked about him on every side, he saw no sign of the great stones standing like a gate, and before long they came to the northern gap and rode swiftly through, and the land fell away before them. It was a merry journey with Tom Bombadil trotting gaily beside them, or before them, on Fatty Lumpkin, who could move much faster than his girth promised. Tom sang most of the time, but it was chiefly nonsense, or else, perhaps, a strange language unknown to the hobbits, an ancient language whose words were mainly those of wonder and delight. They went forward steadily, but they soon saw that the road was further away than they had imagined. Even without a fog, their sleep at midday would have prevented them from reaching it until after nightfall on the day before. The dark line they had seen was not a line of trees, but a line of bushes growing on the edge of a deep dike with a steep wall on the further side. Tom said that it had once been the boundary of a kingdom, but a very long time ago. He seemed to remember something sad about it, and would not say much. These conversations remind me of I'm a big old Tolkien head. I've read a bunch of appendices and chunks of the Silmarillion, although never the whole thing because dear God is it heavy. But I don't know what the 9 kings were king of.
That's an interesting point. I don't either. I mean, obviously one of them was one of them king of Angmar before Angmar was like a place of evil?
No, Angmar's always been a place of evil.
Well, then I got nothing.
Yeah. It could be that the rings were distributed to 9 kings regardless of their moral standing. And the ones that were good were seduced into thinking maybe they could use their ring for good, and then they ended up enslaved. Or maybe there were 9 wicked kingdoms.
See, I don't know, though. Here's what I think, knowing Sauron's style, is that he chose the greatest and wisest and best human kings he could find, and then immediately corrupted them. And the corruption was all the worse because they had been the best.
Right?
Like, you can't tell me that doesn't sound like Sauron.
It sounds very Sauron. It sounds very Tolkien, but I haven't. It might be in chunks of the Silmarillion that I haven't read. It's
got to be somewhere. He knew.
Right. He doesn't talk about the origin of hobbits anywhere, though, so it might be one of those things that we just only get to speculate about.
It's possible.
The 7 dwarf kingdoms are a little easier to find information about because they were there were 7 dwarfs to begin with. That was how many were the first to wake up, and they spread out and they had their 7 kingdoms and they talked amongst themselves, and so it made sense.
Yeah, it was happy, dopey, sleepy. I had to.
Absolutely. And of course, Sauron never touched the 3 rings. But yeah, I'd love to know.
Oh, dude, I saw a fan theory on Tumblr about how the Arkenstone could have actually been a Silmaril. Have you seen that one?
No, but I met the man who wrote an essay about it for his master's thesis.
Well, then you probably know more about it than I do, because it was just a Tumblr post, but it was talking about how the Lonely Mountain isn't part of any mountain chain, and how a volcano could have been created by casting the Silmaril into like a lake of fire.
Oh, I think my acquaintance, he said that it had already been a volcano, and that of the 3 Silmarils, one is with Yarendil in the sky, one was thrown into the ocean, and one was dropped into a volcano, and it could be that the Lonely Mountain was that volcano and it eventually stopped being an active volcano.
And there was the fucking Silmaril just buried way down in the lava, waiting for dwarves to do what they do and delve greedily in too deep.
Like they do.
And how Gandalf must have felt to see the Arkenstone and be like, this fucking rock again.
Always comes back to this fucking rock. The animosity between dwarves and elves was started because of Silmarils. The one that Baron brought back, Thingol hired dwarfs to set it in a necklace, and in the act of making that piece of jewelry, they fell in love with it and said, "No, we're not giving this back now." So a war started.
There's a every time we talk about Silmarils, I think about that thing that's like, if you like someone, you should get them just like a neat rock. And then it's a picture of the Arkenstone, and then it's like, why one rock and not 3? Why not Silmarils? And then it's like, there's an entire book on the subject of why not Silmarils.
Yes. This is true.
I'm happy to report that my hand does not smell weird, even after I wound all that weird smelling yarn. I'm going to go get some knitting needles now. I'll be right back.
I will talk at the camera. Hello, camera.
You can keep reading if you want to.
Woo! Yeah, nothing of import happens. I will keep reading. Although it's funny, so there's a dike and a ditch, right? Boundary of a kingdom. Their boundary was a ha-ha. They'll hear me later. They climbed down and out of the dike and through a gap in the wall, and then Tom turned due north, for they had been bearing somewhat to the west. The land was now open and fairly level, and they quickened their pace, but the sun was already sinking low when at last they saw a line of tall trees ahead, and they knew that they had come back to the road after many unexpected adventures. You didn't hear a word I said, did you? I said that old kingdom was bounded by a dike and a ditch, which means that its boundary was a ha-ha.
Probably more of a ho-ho.
A ho-ho has to be 50 feet deep, though.
Doesn't say it wasn't 50 feet deep.
They climbed down and out of the dike, blah, 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 many unexpected adventures. They galloped their ponies over the last furlongs and halted under the long shadows of the trees. They were on the top of a sloping bank, and the road, now dim as evening drew on, wound away below them. At this point it ran nearly from southwest to northeast, and on their right it fell quickly down into a wide hollow. It was rutted and bore many signs of the recent heavy rain. There were pools and potholes full of water. They rode down the bank and looked up and down. There was nothing to be seen. "Well, here we are again at last," said Frodo. "I suppose we haven't lost more than 2 days by my short cut through the forest. But perhaps the delay will prove useful. It may have put them off our trail." The others looked at him. The shadow of the fear of the Black Riders came suddenly over them again. Ever since they had entered the forest, they had thought chiefly of getting back to the road. Only now, when it lay beneath their feet, did they remember the danger which pursued them, and was more than likely to be lying in wait for them upon the road itself. They looked anxiously back towards the setting sun, but the road was brown and empty.
I mean, to be fair, you can really only be mortally afraid of like one thing at a time.
Yeah, it's true. If you're getting eaten by trees, Black Riders are not going to be at the top of your list.
True that.
"Do you think," asked Pippin hesitatingly, "do you think we may be pursued tonight?" "No, I hope not tonight," answered Tom Bombadil, "nor perhaps the next day. But do not trust my guess, for I cannot tell for certain. Out east my knowledge fails. Tom is not master of riders from the Black Land far beyond his country." All the same, the hobbits wished he was coming with them. They felt that he would know how to deal with Black Riders if anyone did. They would soon now be going forward into lands wholly strange to them, and beyond all but the most vague and distant legends of the Shire, and in the gathering twilight they longed for home. A deep loneliness and sense of loss was on them. They stood silent, reluctant to make the final parting, and only slowly became aware that Tom was wishing them farewell, and telling them to have good heart and to ride on till dark without halting. Tom will give you good advice till this day is over. After that, your own luck must go with you and guide you. 4 miles along the road, you'll come upon a village, Bree under Bree Hill, with doors looking westward. There you'll find an old inn that is called the Prancing Pony. Barlaman Butterbur is the worthy keeper. There you can stay the night, and afterwards the morning will speed you upon your way. Be bold but wary. Keep up your merry hearts, and ride to meet your fortune. They begged him to come at least as far as the inn and drink once more with them, but he laughed and refused, saying, Tom's country ends here. He will not pass the borders. Tom has his house to mind, and Goldberry is waiting. Then he turned, tossed up his hat, leaped on Lumpkin's back, and rode up over the bank and away, singing into the dusk like a cowboy.
Certainly gives a new sort of tinge to the fact that his boots are yellow.
The hobbits climbed up and watched him until he was out of sight. I am sorry to take leave of Master Bombadil, said Sam. He's a caution and no mistake. I reckon we might go a good deal further and see naught better, nor queerer. But I won't deny I'll be glad to see this prancing pony he spoke of. I hope it'll be like the Green Dragon away back home. What sort of folk are they in Bree? There are hobbits in Bree, said Mary, as well as big folk. I dare say it will be homelike enough. The pony is a good inn by all accounts. My people ride out there now and again. It may be all we could wish, said Frodo, but it is outside the Shire all the same. Don't make yourselves too much at home. Please remember, all of you, that the name of Baggins must not be mentioned. I am Mr. Underhill if any name must be given. They now mounted their ponies and rode off silently into the evening. Darkness came down quickly as they plodded slowly downhill and up again, until at last they saw lights twinkling some distance ahead. Before them rose Bree Hill, barring the way, a dark mass against misty stars, and under its western flank nestled a large village. Towards it they now hurried, desiring only to find a fire and a door between them and the night. Chapter 9. At the sign of the Prancing Pony. Bree was the chief village of the Bree land, a small inhabited region like an island in the empty lands round about. Besides Bree itself, there was Staddle on the other side of the hill, Combe in a deep valley a little further eastward, and Archet at the edge of the Chetwood. Lying round Bree Hill and the villages was a small country of fields and tamed woodlands only a few miles broad. The men of Bree were brown-haired, broad, and rather short, cheerful and independent. They belonged to nobody but themselves. But they were more friendly and familiar with hobbits, dwarves, elves, and other inhabitants of the world about them than was, or is, usual with the big people. According to their own tales, they were the original inhabitants, and were the descendants of the first men that ever wandered into the west of the middle world. Few had survived the turmoils of the elder days. But when the kings returned again over the great sea, they had found the Bree men still there, and they were still there now, when the memory of the old kings had faded into the grass. In those days no other men had settled dwellings so far west, or within 100 leagues of the Shire. But in the wild lands beyond Bree there were mysterious wanderers. The Bree folk called them rangers and knew nothing of their origin. They were taller and darker than the men of Bree and were believed to have strange powers of sight and hearing and to understand the languages of beasts and birds. They roamed at will southwards and eastwards even as far as the Misty Mountains, but they were now few and rarely seen.
Goodness, who could they be?
I don't know. Gosh. I don't think they'll have anything to do with our adventure, though.
No, probably just a side note.
Absolutely. We're full of side notes.
I mean, that is actually true.
We never do get to see him understand the languages of beasts and birds, though.
It's true.
Damn.
Yeah.
It's just part of the mystique. When they appeared, they brought news from afar and told strange, forgotten tales which were eagerly listened to, but the Bree folk did not make friends of them. There were also many families of hobbits in the Bree land, and they claimed to be the oldest settlement of hobbits in the world. I hear Jeremy Clarkson every time I see that phrase.
Right.
One that was founded long before even the Brandywine was crossed and the Shire colonized. They lived mostly in Stattle, though there were some in Bree itself, especially on the higher slopes of the hill above the houses of the men. The big folk and the little folk, as they called one another, were on friendly terms, minding their own affairs in their own ways, but both rightly regarding themselves as necessary parts of the Bree folk. Nowhere else in the world was this peculiar but excellent arrangement to be found. The Bree folk, big and little, did not themselves travel much, and the affairs of the 4 villages were their chief concern. Occasionally the hobbits of Bree went as far as Buckland or the East Farthing, but though their little land was not much further than a day's riding east of the Brandywine Bridge, the hobbits of the Shire now seldom visited it. An occasional Bucklander or adventurous Took would come out to the inn for a night or two, but even that was becoming less and less usual. The Shire hobbits referred to those of Bree, and to any others that lived beyond the borders, as outsiders, and took very little interest in them, considering them dull and uncouth. Hang on a sec. Hey! Okay. Dull and uncouth?
Dull and uncouth.
There were probably many more outsiders scattered about in the west of the world in those days than the people of the Shire imagined. Some, doubtless, were no better than tramps, ready to dig a hole in any bank and stay only as long as it suited them. We never meet a tramp hobbit, and I definitely want to. I want to read stories about a hobbit vagrant. Like, hobbit gypsy, come on! But in the Bree land, at any rate, the hobbits were decent and prosperous, and no more rustic than most of their distant relatives inside. It was not yet forgotten that there had been a time when there was much coming and going between the Shire and Bree. There was Bree blood in the Brandybucks, by all accounts. The village of Bree had some 100 stone houses of the big folk, mostly above the road, nestling on the hillside with windows looking west. On that side, running in more than half a circle from the hill and back to it, there was a deep dike with a thick hedge on the inner side. Over this the road crossed by a causeway, but where it pierced the hedge it was barred by a great gate. There was another gate in the southern corner where the road ran out of the village.
But that one was just okay.
Yeah. The gates were closed at nightfall, but just inside them were small lodges for the gatekeepers and the keymasters.
Part of Ghostbusters that ages the worst.
Yeah, but it's such a time capsule. Down on the road where it swept to the right to go round the foot of the hill, there was a large inn. It had been built long ago when the traffic on the roads had been far greater. For Bree stood at an old meeting of ways. Another ancient road crossed the east road just outside the dike at the western end of the village, and in former days men and other folk of various sorts had travelled much on it. Strange as news from Bree was still a saying in the East Farthing, descending from those days when news from north, south, and east could be heard in the inn, and when the Shire hobbits used to go more often to hear it. But the northern lands had long been desolate, and the north road was now seldom used. It was grass-grown, and the Bree folk called it the Greenway. The Inn of Bree was still there, however, and the innkeeper was an important person. His house was a meeting place for the idle, talkative, and inquisitive among the inhabitants, large and small, of the 4 villages, and a resort of rangers and other wanderers, and for such travellers, mostly dwarfs, as still journeyed on the east road to and from the mountains. It was dark, and white stars were shining when Frodo and his companions came at last to the Greenway crossing and drew near the village. They came to the west gate and found it shut, but at the door of the lodge behind it there was a man sitting. He jumped up and fetched a lantern and looked over the gate at them in surprise. "What do you want, and where do you come from?" he asked gruffly. "We are making for the inn here," answered Frodo. "We are journeying east and cannot go further tonight." "Hobbits. 4 hobbits, and once more out of the Shire by their talk," said the gatekeeper, softly as if speaking to himself. He stared at them darkly for a moment, and then slowly opened the gate and let them ride through. "We don't often see Shire folk riding on the road at night," he went on as they halted a moment by his door. "You'll pardon my wondering what business takes you away east of Bree. What may your names be, may I ask?" "Our names and our business are our own, and this does not seem a good place to discuss them," said Frodo, not liking the look of the man or the tone of his voice. "Your business is your own, no doubt," said the man, "but it's my business to ask questions after nightfall." We are hobbits from Buckland, and we have a fancy to travel and to stay at the inn here," put in Mary. "I am Mr. Brandybuck. Is that enough for you? The Bree folk used to be fair-spoken to travellers, or so I had heard." All right. I can't do that thing with my neck. I'm too white.
You are that. I say, as if I am not also that.
Hey, nothing we can help. All right, said the man. "I meant no offence, but you'll find maybe that more folk than old Harry at the gate will be asking you questions. There's queer folk about. If you go on to the pony, you'll find you're not the only guests." He wished them good night, and they said no more, but Frodo could see in the lantern light that the man was still eyeing them curiously. He was glad to hear the gate clang to behind them as they rode forward. He wondered why the man was so suspicious, and whether anyone had been asking for news of a party of hobbits. Could it have been Gandalf?
Or could it be all those people who are trying to kill you?
Yeah, them.
Just thinking. Anyways.
He might have arrived while they were delayed in the forest and the downs, but there was something in the look and the voice of the gatekeeper that made him uneasy. The man stared after the hobbits for a moment, and then he went back to his house. As soon as his back was turned, a dark figure climbed quickly in over the gate and melted into the shadows of the village street. The hobbits rode on up a gentle slope, passing a few detached houses, and drew up outside the inn. The houses looked large and strange to them. Sam stared up at the inn with its 3 stories and many windows and felt his heart sink. He had imagined himself meeting giants taller than trees and other creatures even more terrifying some time or other in the course of his journey. But at the moment he was finding his first sight of men and their tall houses quite enough. Indeed, too much for the dark end of a tiring day. He pictured black horses standing all saddled in the shadows of the inn yard and black riders peering out of dark upper windows. "We surely aren't going to stay here for the night, are we, sir?" he exclaimed. "If there are hobbit folk in these parts, why don't we look for some that would be willing to take us in? That would be more home-like." "What's wrong with the inn?" said Frodo. "Tom Bombadil recommended it. I expect it's home-like enough inside." Even from the outside, the inn looked a pleasant house to familiar eyes. It had a front on the road and 2 wings running back on land partly cut out of the lower slopes of the hill, so that at the rear these second-floor windows were level with the ground. There was a wide arch leading to a courtyard, and in between the two wings, and on the left, under the arch, there was a large doorway reached by a few broad steps. The door was open and light streamed out of it. Above the arch there was a lamp, and beneath it swung a large signboard. A fat white pony reared up on its hind legs. Over the door was painted in white letters, "The Prancing Pony by Barlaam Butterbur." Many of the lower windows showed lights behind thick curtains. As they hesitated outside in the gloom, someone began singing a merry song inside, and many cheerful voices joined loudly in the chorus. They listened to this encouraging sound for a moment and then got off their ponies. I'm sorry, I'm thinking Scotsman clad in kilt left the bar one evening fair.
I don't know where you've been, my lad, but I see you've won first prize. Earlier, so there's this thing that we've been sort of singing at work on my team. It's like don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious. And that's what I'm thinking of when the guy like looks at them suspiciously, is the hobbits just being like, don't be suspicious. I'll find the video and link it in the description if I remember.
Do. That'd be awesome. Oh, they listened to this encouraging sound for a moment and then got off their ponies. The song ended and there was a burst of laughter and clapping. They led their ponies under the arch, and leaving them standing in the yard, they climbed up the steps. Frodo went forward and nearly bumped into a short, fat man with a bald head and a red face. He had a white apron on and was bustling out of one door and in through another, carrying a tray laden with full mugs. "Can we—" began Frodo. "Half a minute, if you please," shouted the man over his shoulder and vanished into a babble of voices and a cloud of smoke. In a moment he was out again, wiping his hands on his apron. "Good evening, little master," he said, bending down. "What may you be wanting?" "Beds for 4 and stabling for 5 ponies, if that can be managed. Are you Mr. Butterbur?" "That's right. Barlaam is my name. Barlaam Butterbur at your service. You're from the Shire, eh?" he said, and then suddenly he clapped his hand to his forehead as if trying to remember something. "Hobbits!" he cried. "Now what does that remind me of? Might I ask your names, sir?" "Mr. Took and Mr. Brandybuck," said Frodo, "and this is Sam Gamgee. My name is Underhill." There now, said Mr. Butterbur, snapping his fingers. It's gone again, but it'll come back when I have time to think. I'm run off my feet, but I'll see what I can do for you. We don't often get a party out of the Shire nowadays, and I should be sorry not to make you welcome. But there is such a crowd already in the house tonight as there hasn't been for long enough. It never rains, but it pours, we say in Bree. Hi, Nob, he shouted. Where are you, you woolly-footed slow coach? Them's fighting words. Oh, man. Nob! Coming, sir, coming! A cheery-looking hobbit bobbed out of a door, and seeing the travellers, stopped short and stared at them with great interest. Where's Bob? Asked the landlord. You don't know? Well, find him, double sharp. I haven't got 6 legs, nor 6 eyes neither. Tell Bob there's 5 ponies that have got to be stabled. He must find room somehow. Nob trotted off with a grin and a wink. Well, now, what was I going to say? Said Mr. Butterbur, tapping his forehead. One thing drives out another, so to speak. I'm that busy tonight my head is going round. There's a party that come up the Greenway from down south last night. That was strange enough to begin with. Then there's a travelling company of dwarfs going west coming in this evening. And now there's you. If you weren't hobbits, I doubt if we could house you. But we've got a room or 2 in the north wing that were made special for hobbits when this place was built. On the ground floor, as they usually prefer, round windows and all as they like it. I hope you'll be comfortable. You'll be wanting supper, I don't doubt, as soon as may be. This way now. He led them a short way down a passage and opened a door. Here is a nice little parlour, he said. I hope it will suit. Excuse me now, I'm that busy. No time for talking, I must be trotting. It's hard work for 2 legs, but I don't get thinner. I'll look in again later. If you want anything, ring a handbell and Nob will come. If you don't come, ring and shout. Off he went at last, and left them feeling rather breathless. He seemed capable of an endless stream of talk, however busy he might be. They found themselves in a small and cozy room. There was a bit of bright fire burning on the hearth, and in front of it were some low and comfortable chairs. There was a round table already spread with a white cloth, and on it was a large handbell. But Nob, the hobbit servant, came bustling in long before they thought of ringing. He brought candles and a tray full of plates. Will you be wanting anything to drink, masters? He asked. And shall I show you the bedrooms while your supper is got ready? They were washed, and in the middle of good deep mugs of beer when Mr. Butterbur and Nob came in again. Were you waiting for me, or just listening?
Nope, just listening. I am done with my swatch, and I can't knit anymore right now because my thumb's starting to get sore.
Sorry. Do you want to cut it short? I always make that offer when it's me reading, have you noticed?
Yeah, what's that about, huh?
I have to read aloud tonight. We do alternating nights. Last Unicorn and Twin Peaks. My dreams have been very weird.
That sounds like a very weird dream mix. But yeah, no, we can end it early. That's totally fine.
Cool. Hang on, let's get to a good place because there's a little gap here.
Sure.
They were washed and in the middle of good deep mugs of beer when Mr. Butterbur and Nob came in again. In a twinkling the table was laid. There was hot soup, cold meats, a blackberry tart, new loaves, slabs of butter, and half a ripe cheese. Good, plain food, as good as the Shire could show, and homelike enough to dispel the last of Sam's misgivings, already much relieved by the excellence of the beer. The landlord hovered round for a little and then prepared to leave them. I don't know whether you would care to join the company when you have supped, he said, standing at the door. Perhaps you would rather go to your beds. Still, the company would be very pleased to welcome you if you had a mind. We don't get outsiders, travellers from the Shire, I should say, begging your pardon, often, and we like to hear a bit of news or any story or song you may have in mind. But, as you please, ring the bell if you lack anything. So refreshed and encouraged did they feel at the end of their supper, about 3/4 of an hour's steady going, not hindered by unnecessary talk, that Frodo, Pippin, and Sam decided to join the company. Merry said it would be too stuffy. I shall sit here quietly by the fire for a bit, and perhaps go out later for a sniff of the air. Mind your P's and Q's, and don't forget that you are supposed to be escaping in secret, and are still on the high road and not very far from the Shire. All right, said Pippin. Mind yourself. Don't get lost, and don't forget that it is safer indoors.
Those are good words to end on for tonight, folks.
We all have time if we take the next few minutes to get outside and howl with the neighbors.
Indeed.
I've only done it once. I keep forgetting. It's usually like 10:30 when I'm like, oh yeah, that happened. But the one time I did go out, it felt really nice because like there were several people in the neighborhood howling, and it felt like such a simple way to show some solidarity.
There you go.
Right?
Well, I am going to, I don't know what I'm going to do. Wash that swatch.
Wash the swatch. I'm going to howl, make some chocolate fondue, put the youngling to bed, read, Mom.
Sounds like fun.
I love you. I hope your thumb feels better.
I love you too. Thank you.
Get some arnica on that shit.
I don't know if arnica will work for what the issue is, but I'll see if we have any.
Right. Cuidado.
Diamas.